The glass of champagne slipped across the floor as my sister's voice cut through the laughter. Shadow. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment my smile cracked, the insult echoing like it had since childhood. To them, we were the perfect family, gilded and untouchable. Yet every sparkle in that ballroom burned into me like proof I didn't belong. Her hand moved faster than I could breathe, and the sting across my cheek was louder than the applause. I thought I'd collapse until I saw him standing there, calm, unshaken, and ready to turn this nightmare into something I'd never imagined. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers so heavy they looked like they could crash down at any moment and shatter the illusion of perfection my parents worked so hard to stage. Tonight was their 40th wedding anniversary, a spectacle rehearsed for months, trending live on social media under hashtags carefully crafted by Vivian. Guests circled like moths around candlelight, praising the Hayes family as if our name were carved in marble. Cameras swept across polished marble floors, sequined gowns, and champagne towers, all orchestrated to prove that we were untouchable. I stood a half step behind my sister, just enough to fade from the lens, just enough for everyone to mistake me for her assistant rather than her blood. When the host introduced us, Vivian's name rang like a bell while mine was whispered, almost swallowed. "This is Clara, the quieter sister," he said, chuckling as though silence were a flaw. My smile stiffened, the kind of smile that hides bruises no one can see. Vivian leaned close enough for the camera to miss her words, but not close enough for me to escape them. "Try not to embarrass us tonight," she hissed, and then she turned, dazzling the audience with a grin as though we were best friends. My parents nodded approvingly, drinking in the applause. As speeches began, I drifted toward the edge of the crowd, pressing my palm against the silk of my dress, grounding myself. Then it happened. Across the ballroom, through the blur of champagne glasses and glittering jewels, a man I didn't recognize was staring at me, not with flirtation, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as if he knew a secret I'd buried so deeply even my family didn't suspect. I dropped my gaze, but when I looked back, he was still there, his eyes steady, almost warning me that tonight would unravel something I wasn't prepared for. The orchestra swelled, and waiters floated through with trays of golden flutes. Vivian, ever the star, snatched one and spun theatrically, but her heel clipped the hem of my gown. A splash of wine cascaded down the pale fabric, crimson blooming like a wound. Gasps rippled from the guests, and phones lifted instantly. Every slip here was content. "Oh, Shadow strikes again," Vivian announced, her voice pitched high for the microphones. Her laughter rippled, perfectly rehearsed. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, children, always playing," while my father clinked his glass, declaring, "Let's not spoil the moment." Spoil. As though my humiliation were a speck of dust to be brushed away. I froze, every instinct screaming to protest, but my parents' eyes bore into me, commanding silence. "Clara," my mother sang sweetly, "say something funny, darling. Make light of it. Apologize, just to keep the peace." In that moment, I wasn't just a daughter. I was a prop, a backdrop to highlight my sister's glow. My lips parted, but no words came. Inside, I whispered to you, yes, you reading this. If you were me, would you apologize? Would you pretend that a lifetime of insults was just another joke? Vivian grinned wider, soaking up the crowd's sympathy. The stain spread across my dress, warm and sticky, as if to tattoo her dominance on my body. Guests whispered, cameras clicked, hashtags spun in real time. Shadow spill, I imagined, already trending. I excused myself, retreating to the hallway lined with portraits of my parents through the decades, their engagement, their first home, Vivian as a baby, Vivian at her graduation, Vivian in every milestone. My face appeared only in the corners, blurred, often cropped. Always secondary, always replaceable. I found refuge by a window, the city lights beyond reminding me there was life outside these walls, life that didn't care whether Vivian sparkled or not. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. At first, I thought it was another cousin sending a meme about the spill, but the notification was from an unknown number. No profile picture, no name. Just a single line. I know the truth about the will. My pulse stuttered. The words burned on the screen like a flame threatening to consume the entire illusion of our perfect family. I glanced back into the ballroom where Vivian danced beneath the chandelier, adored and applauded. My parents glowed in the artificial light, the cameras capturing every angle of their supposed harmony. But I knew better, and now someone else did too. The message haunted me all night, glowing in my mind long after I had turned off the phone. I know the truth about the will. The words carried promise and threat at once. For a moment, I felt hope. Someone out there, unseen, had proof of what I always suspected. Perhaps I wasn't crazy. Perhaps I wasn't the family's expendable shadow. But hope has a cruel way of collapsing under the weight of reality. By morning, the internet had turned against me. A video clip spread across every platform, showing me standing rigid with a glass in hand as Vivian spun around, wine cascading over my gown. But the clip had been cut just so, beginning with me frowning and ending with me stepping back sharply. No context, no sound, just a loop designed to tell a story that wasn't true. She lunged at Vivian. She ruined the celebration. Typical bitter sibling. The comments were knives. Within hours, hashtags bloomed like weeds. Chas shadow strike, us ungrateful sister, as family drama exposed. At brunch, my mother phoned with her well-rehearsed pity. Darling, you know how the internet is. They exaggerate. But perhaps if you issue a light-hearted apology, people will laugh and move on. Move on. For her, that meant preserving the Hayes family name. For me, it meant swallowing humiliation until it calcified inside me. I ended the call without promising anything. The whisper of hope, the message from the unknown number, lingered in my chest, but it collided with this tidal wave of slander. I scrolled until my eyes burned. Headlines painted me as a parasite, suggesting I survived only by clinging to some secret rich husband. They were close to the truth, but twisted it into poison. Yes, I was married, but in privacy, by choice, not for gain. My husband's power was real, but it was never my weapon. If anything, I had hidden him to avoid exactly this circus. Late in the afternoon, another buzz shook my phone. A new message from the same anonymous sender. This time, not words, but sound. I pressed play and froze as my father's voice filled the silence. The house will never belong to Clara. Not while I live. My breath caught. The recording was muffled, as if captured from behind a door, but the bitterness was clear. I sank to the floor, my chest heavy. There it was, proof of what I had always known but never heard out loud. For a heartbeat, it was validation. Then it turned to despair, because knowing didn't change the cruelty, it only sharpened it. I clutched the phone in my palm, whispering in my head to you again. If you heard your father's voice deny you your own home, what would you do? Would you fight, or would you walk away forever? The following evening, Vivian staged her next performance. A live stream from her loft. All warm light and curated plants, thousands of viewers pouring hearts and fire emojis across the screen. She laughed, radiant, a glass of wine in her hand. I'm honored, she said sweetly, that Father trusts me with the company. It's a heavy crown, but I'll wear it for our family's legacy. My name was never mentioned, but the comments told the rest. Where's Clara? Didn't she try to sabotage the event? Always the jealous one. Vivian tilted her head, feigning reluctance, then let slip. Sometimes sacrifice is needed. Some of us must give more than others. Father knows who is loyal. The audience exploded, filling the feed with praise. Loyal. The word cracked something in me. In a single sentence, she had painted me as the traitor, and my parents let her. Within hours, relatives were messaging me not with sympathy, but condemnation. Why can't you support Vivian for once? Stop making trouble, Clara. You're tearing the family apart. It was official. I had been cast as the scapegoat, the designated vessel for all blame. I wanted to scream, but instead I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, city buzzing outside the windows like a life I no longer belonged to. I slipped off my jacket, and there it was again. The ring I kept hidden, tucked inside a drawer, rarely worn because it meant too much. My wedding ring, proof that I was more than a shadow. I lifted it in the dim light, tears finally falling. For once, I didn't try to stop them. Silence wrapped around me. The online storm raged on, but here, in this small pocket of quiet, I could grieve what I had lost. Not just a family, but the illusion that they had ever loved me equally. Then came the knock. Soft, deliberate. I hesitated, pressing my ear to the door. No voice, no sound of retreating footsteps, only the silence of someone waiting. My heart pounded as I turned the knob and found a large envelope at my feet. No return address, no mark. I carried it to the table, my hands trembling, and slid the flap open. Inside were photographs. Crisp, high-resolution shots of Vivian, elegant in her tailored suit, shaking hands across a polished table. Her signature bled across the corner of a contract, bold and final. The header was unmistakable. Sale of corporate shares. Vivian hadn't just inherited. She was selling the company, our family's empire, quietly, secretly, to outsiders. And she had smiled while the world applauded her loyalty. The chandelier light from the photo reflected off her grin, mocking me. My stomach turned cold. The announcement came on a Sunday, wrapped in the facade of family unity. My father had summoned everyone to the manor, cameras stationed discreetly among the floral arrangements, journalists hovering like vultures with pens disguised as daggers. Vivian stood at his right hand, radiant as ever, while I was positioned 3 steps behind, a deliberate reminder of my place. The air reeked of roses and staged civility, but beneath it I could smell the coming rot. He cleared his throat, unfolding a thick packet of papers. "Today," he began, "I want to assure our legacy is preserved. This family has always stood together, and it is time to make the future clear." The crowd murmured approval. My chest tightened. Then he read it. The new will. Every asset, every property, every stake in the company, Vivian's name etched beside them like a golden crown. Mine was absent, erased as though I had never belonged. His voice carried pride when he declared her the rightful heir, as if my erasure were an act of wisdom. For a moment, hope flickered. The photographs I had received showed Vivian signing something dangerous, a contract that betrayed the company. If I revealed them now, maybe the applause would halt, maybe truth would burn through the lies. I pulled the prints from my bag, gripping them like lifelines, but the lawyer at his side leaned into the microphone. "For clarity, these agreements have been reviewed and are perfectly legal. The clauses protect our interests, and the buyers are vetted. The papers Vivian signed weren't illegal at all. They were lawful, binding, even shrewd on the surface. Yet hidden within them, I recognized clauses that would bleed the company dry within 5 years. She wasn't saving the family. She was dismantling it, piece by piece. I stared at the photos in my hand, the hope draining like sand through an hourglass. The audience clapped, some even whistled. Vivian accepted the applause with practiced modesty, lowering her lashes like a queen humbled by her crown. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, as though I stood on the edge of a chasm no one else could see. A flash of memory struck, my mother's handwriting, looping and delicate. I remembered seeing her signature on a will years ago, tucked away in a desk drawer she never let Father touch. That memory lodged itself like a splinter in my mind. I had never forgotten the curl of her H, the careful underline of her name. The document Father read today bore none of it. Instead, his signature dominated every page, while hers was absent, replaced by legal jargon. A counterfeit of memory, a rewriting of truth. I felt heat rise in my chest, rage tangled with grief. They had erased me on paper, but worse, they had erased her too. The journalists dispersed, satisfied with their narrative. Guests congratulated Vivian, shaking hands as if touching her might transmit power. I drifted through the crowd, invisible as ever, until I escaped to the back hallway where the portraits hung. Each frame showed my parents' triumphs, Vivian's milestones. My image appeared only as a blur in the background, a shadow on the edge of someone else's story. By nightfall, the internet had sharpened its knives again. The trending tag was Tall's shadow sister. Memes mocked my expression during the announcement. Wide-eyed, stiff, a deer caught in headlights. One clip zoomed in on my clenched jaw, captioned, "Jealous much?" The world laughed, not realizing I was drowning. I curled on the couch in my apartment, the glow of the city bleeding through the blinds. I pressed the old photographs of my mother to my chest, whispering her words from long ago. "One day, Clara, you will shine. Even shadows can find the sun." I let the tears fall freely, not as a performance, but as a surrender to grief I had carried too long. Hours later, I rummaged through the boxes she left behind, desperate for something more, something real. At the bottom of a worn trunk, beneath faded scarves and letters, I found it. A small brass key taped to an envelope addressed in her script. My breath caught. The words read simply, "For Clara. Keep safe until the time is right." I turned the key over in my palm, the weight of it solid, undeniable. The envelope mentioned a safe deposit box at a bank I hadn't visited in years. My pulse quickened. What had she hidden there? Why had she kept it from the rest of them? I sat back, clutching the key, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. The world outside still laughed at me, hashtags still trended, but in my hand was a promise, a door my mother had left me to open, and I was ready to turn the lock. The key sat heavy in my palm for days, a weight both terrifying and irresistible. My nights blurred into restless hours, my mind circling the same questions. What had my mother hidden, and why only for me? But before I could open the door she left behind, I had to face the darkness inside me first. Therapy was the only place where I could speak without being silenced. I sat across from Dr. Ellis, hands folded tightly in my lap, words tangled on my tongue. She listened as I recounted the announcement. The internet mockery, the erasure from the will. I expected her to tell me I was overreacting, the way my family always had. Instead, she leaned forward. "What you've described," she said gently, "is a family system with a golden child and a scapegoat. Vivian has been rewarded for her every move. You, on the other hand, were cast as the problem no matter what you did. The system survives by making you believe you deserve it." Her words split me open. For years, I had believed I was at fault, that my silence, my distance, my inability to smile on command had justified their cruelty. But now, the shame curdled into something else. Anger. Not reckless rage, but a righteous fire, the kind that illuminated rather than consumed. On my way out of her office, the man from the anniversary party stood waiting by the elevator. He wasn't just a guest, as I'd assumed. He introduced himself with calm certainty. "Daniel Price. I was your mother's attorney." The ground shifted beneath me. He explained that my mother had entrusted him with documents years ago, things too dangerous to leave in my father's hands. "She knew what Vivian was capable of. She wanted you to have a chance to defend yourself when the time came." From his pocket, he produced a small brass key identical to the one I had found in her trunk. My breath caught as he pressed it into my hand. "This opens the safe deposit box. It's time you saw what she left." That night, I barely slept, the keys burning against my skin. At dawn, I went to the bank, Daniel by my side. The clerk led us to a private room and placed the long, narrow box on the table. My hands shook as I turned both keys in the lock, the click louder than my heartbeat. Inside lay folders, tapes, and letters sealed in my mother's handwriting. I lifted the top folder, and there it was, a recording dated 2 years before her death. On the tape, her voice was clear, steady, heartbreakingly familiar. "I know Vivian has been diverting funds. I have tried to warn your father, but he refuses to see. If anyone is listening, understand this. Clara is not the problem. She never was. Vivian is destroying everything. My vision blurred. Every cell in my body ached with both relief and grief. She had seen me. She had believed me. Beneath the tape lay account statements, checks signed by Vivian, and a list of shell companies tied to her name. Proof. Evidence that couldn't be spun as jealousy or hysteria. Daniel nodded. With this, you can challenge everything, but you'll need more. They'll fight. So I began my quiet war. I gathered CCTV from the jewelry store where Vivian had humiliated me. I requested logs from the company's servers, emails Vivian thought were deleted. I printed receipts, notarized copies, anything that could anchor me to the truth. At night, exhaustion gnawed at me, but I forced myself to write. In a notebook I titled, "For whoever needs this one day," I addressed you, the stranger, the reader, the silent witness. If you're reading this, I wrote, you may know what it is to be erased, to be told your pain is too loud, your silence too stubborn, your existence too much. I am leaving this behind not as proof that I was right, but that I survived long enough to find my voice. If I fall, let this remind you, you are not the problem. Tears stained the page, but I didn't wipe them away. They were part of the record, too. One evening, as I reviewed property records, I stumbled across something buried deep in legal filings, something my father had hidden. A child born outside the marriage acknowledged quietly in financial support documents but never spoken of aloud. A half-sibling I had never known. The implications slammed into me. If true, it meant the entire will could be contested. It meant Vivian's empire wasn't as secure as she thought. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the walls of my apartment trembling with the weight of secrets unraveling. My mother had left me keys to truth. My father had left behind lies waiting to collapse. The war was no longer just about inheritance. It was about identity, bloodlines, and the fractures my family had buried beneath gold and glitter, and I was ready to tear it all into the light. The room was packed with cameras, their lenses glinting like watchful eyes, eager to devour scandal. I stood at the podium, palms slick but spine straight. Daniel adjusted the microphone and gave me a nod that meant, now or never. I began with the footage. The uncut jewelry store recording filled the screen behind me. Vivian's hand striking me, her voice sharp, her smile twisting once she realized the cameras were rolling. Gasps rippled through the audience as the loop played again. No edits, no manufactured narrative, just truth in its raw form. Next, the recording of my mother's voice, the sound carried like a ghost returning to demand justice. Clara is not the problem. Vivian is destroying everything. The words cracked something in the room. Even reporters who had labeled me bitter now sat forward, brows furrowed, pens frozen in midair. Finally, the contracts. I displayed the very documents Vivian had signed, the ones she paraded as loyalty, while pointing out the clauses that drained the company's assets into the hands of outsiders. She was not preserving our family legacy, I said clearly, my voice steady. She was selling it. The room shifted, whispers thick as smoke. Vivian rose from her seat, eyes blazing. She had prepared for this. Lies, she snapped, raising a folder high. If you want truth, look at this. On the screens appeared emails, supposedly mine, full of venom, messages begging for money, threatening to expose secrets unless I was paid. Gasps turned to murmurs, judgment flashing sharp in the air. For a second, panic knifed through me, but then Daniel stepped forward, calm as ever. These emails, he said, holding up the folder, were fabricated. Metadata shows they were created only weeks ago from Vivian's assistant's computer. He passed copies to the nearest journalists, who leaned over them like wolves catching scent of prey. Vivian stammered, her face paling under the lights. The twist landed. Her trap had collapsed under its own weight. Live, in front of the world. I should have felt triumph, but what came instead was silence. A fragile, suspended moment where the truth finally outweighed the lies. And then, chaos. My father lurched to his feet, his complexion gray, his hands trembling. "Enough," he croaked. His voice cracked the air like a confession forced through decades of repression. "There is more you don't know." The room stilled. Reporters leaned in, recording devices thrust forward. He swallowed hard. I have another child. Outside this marriage." His eyes darted to the floor. "And I have supported him quietly all these years." The admission detonated like a bomb. Gasps, shouts, frantic scribbling filled the space. Vivian froze, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My mother's portrait, hung at the back of the room, seemed to stare down at him with cold disapproval. The conference collapsed into noise, journalists swarming for statements. I stood rooted, heart pounding, realizing that the foundation of our family had not only cracked, it had shattered completely. In the hours that followed, the storm consumed us. Headlines shifted from "Ungrateful Shadow Sister" to "Golden Child Exposed" and "Hayes Family Scandal Deepens." Vivian's sponsors pulled back, her social media feeds flooded with anger instead of admiration. The empire she built on lies was burning down, live-streamed for the world to see. My father tried to salvage his dignity, insisting I had forced his confession. My mother, pale and silent, clung to appearances, but the tide had turned. Their attempts to brand me the destroyer fell flat. The world had seen enough evidence, enough duplicity to know who the villains were. By nightfall, I returned to my apartment, the city lights flickering like embers through the window. My body trembled not from fear but from release. I opened the window, letting in the cold night air, and breathed deep. "Finally," I whispered. Not to them, but to you, to the silent witness I had carried inside me all these years. Finally, I still have myself. The ache remained. Loss, betrayal, the ruins of what family should have been. But beneath it all was a fragile peace. For once, I wasn't Shadow. I wasn't erased. I was simply Clara, and I was still standing. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification lit the screen. The subject line bore my name in bold letters, followed by the words, "Legal confirmation." My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Ms. Hayes," it read, "after review of your mother's documents and verified signatures, it is confirmed you are the rightful heir to the Elmwood estate. Please contact our office to arrange transfer." The breath left my body. The house. The one my father swore would never belong to me. My mother had ensured otherwise. I pressed the phone to my chest, the city beyond blurred by tears I did not hide. For the first time, I felt not erased, not forgotten, but chosen. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within weeks, Vivian's empire crumbled. Her fiancé, once so proudly displayed on her arm, ended their engagement in silence, returning the ring without ceremony. Investors withdrew, contracts dissolved, and her once beloved social media pages turned hostile. She was forced to deactivate her accounts, hiding from the same spotlight she had once craved. Worse, the legal documents my mother had hidden became the foundation of a formal investigation. Vivian faced charges for fraud, her assets frozen as the courts untangled the web she had spun. For years, she had worn the crown of the golden child, adored and untouchable. Now, stripped of everything, she stood exposed. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt was something quieter, heavier, a grief for what could have been, for the sister I had once hoped to love. Not all of my relatives clung to the illusion. A few cousins reached out, their voices shaky with guilt. "We didn't know, Clara. We believed what they told us." Their messages were timid but real, seeds of acknowledgement that eased some of the sting. Even an uncle who had never defended me admitted, "You were right. I see that now." The recognition didn't erase the years of silence, but it cracked the wall of complicity, letting a sliver of truth through. As for the company, the board offered me the seat Vivian had lost. They expected me to seize it, to claim revenge wrapped in authority. But when I stood in that boardroom, the polished table reflecting back my uncertain face, I realized something profound. I didn't want it. The The company was poisoned soil. My fight had never been to sit on the throne they built. It had been to step out from under it. So I declined. "I won't take the company," I told them, "but I trust you to put it in better hands." Shock rippled across the room. Even Daniel raised a brow. Yet the decision felt clean, liberating. Power had always been their weapon. I would not wield it. I thought that would be the final act, but life has a way of writing new chapters. One evening, as I sifted through the mail on my kitchen counter, a cream-colored envelope caught my eye. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the return address blank. Inside was a card, simple and direct. "I would like to meet you. E." The name sent a tremor through me. It was the child my father had confessed to, the half-sibling I had never known. A door cracked open to a new family I hadn't asked for, yet perhaps needed. I folded the card carefully, my heart conflicted but curious. In the quiet that followed the storm, I began to rebuild. Not the family I had lost, but the life I had always deserved. I surrounded myself with people who saw me, not as a shadow, not as a scapegoat, but as Clara. Friends who had stood by me, Daniel who had risked his career for the truth, and a community I found online, strangers who shared their own stories of gaslighting and survival. Together, we formed something that felt more like family than blood had ever given me. I wore my mother's necklace every day, a small silver chain with a modest pendant. Not a crown, not an heirloom of wealth, but a symbol of love untainted by ambition. When I touched it, I felt her presence, not in the echoes of scandal, but in the quiet assurance that I had chosen the path she would have wanted. I told my story, first in whispers, then in louder voices. A podcast reached out, inviting me to speak about resilience, and for the first time I shared the full truth, unedited, unsanitized. Thousands listened, many wrote back. "You gave me courage," one message read. Another, "I thought I was the only one." Each word became a stitch in a new fabric of belonging. One night, as I sat at my desk recording another episode, I paused, looking directly into the camera. My reflection stared back, tired but unbroken, scarred but luminous. I took a breath and let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the journey settle. Then I smiled, steady and unafraid. "The light never left me," I said softly. "I only had to learn to stand in the right place." And for the first time in my life, I believed it.